If you've spent any time at all on LinkedIn, at least as a Naval Academy grad, you have got to be aware of Iron Mike Stedman, right? Mike's Naval Academy class of 2010. He was a national collegiate light heavyweight boxing champ, not once, but 3 times. So from there, he took a commission in the Marine Infantry. What else, right? And carried his gloves to Afghanistan. And I imagine we'll find a couple of stories if we dig around in there. But now Mike runs Ironbound Boxing, which uses boxing as a path to personal and leadership development, and is doing some seriously good work in some of the rougher parts of New Jersey. So you know how I said a few minutes ago that service is something we do with our sleeves rolled up and our boots on? This is what I'm talking about. So Mike, man, thanks for joining us. I've really been kind of waiting for this one. I'm really excited to hear your story, man. So let's hear what you got.
Jason, it's a pleasure to be here. First of all, hope everyone's staying safe and social distancing. But it is always a pleasure to get in front of Academy people, man. And I've been chatting with Jason on LinkedIn back and forth, and it's cool to finally be able to come out here and speak to you all. And like my name, I go by Iron Mike Stedman these days, because I'm gonna tell you, if you lived in Newark, New Jersey, in the midst of a pandemic, your first name would probably be Iron too. I don't know, man. It's a time for leadership, and finding that inner strength, and I just kind of channeled it. But I'll give you a quick background about my story, how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. Again, my name's Iron Mike Stedman. I'm originally from Bryan, College Station, Texas. Was raised by my mom, single parent home. Never met my dad till this day. And but growing up, one of the things for me was like most people back in the day, a lot of us want to be Navy SEALs. I don't know if that's still a thing, but back in the day, I feel like a lot of young men at some point all wanted to be Special Forces or Navy SEALs. And when I saw the posters and everything, I was like, I want to be a Navy SEAL. And I found out that I could go to college and be a Navy SEAL by going to this place called the United States Naval Academy. And so that's what led me out to Annapolis. Didn't have the grades to go in right away, so they sent me to the prep school up in Newport, Rhode Island, which was a great experience. Have some great classmates from there till this day. And then had opportunity to go to Annapolis, earn my spot. And that was where I got introduced to the sport of boxing. And I actually found out I was pretty good at it. Like Jason said, I was a 3-time national boxing champion, 2-time most valuable boxer, captain of my boxing team, you name it. But one of the things I tell people is you don't win 3 national championships boxing a bunch of midshipmen. I spent a lot of time in inner city boxing gyms in Baltimore, Richmond, New York, the Bronx, Brooklyn. And one of the things that always bothered me in this environment was a lot of the young men and women inside these boxing gyms felt like their only option was to either turn pro or go back to the streets. And I felt like that was a broken system, because at Navy, at the end of the day, we're boxing, but we're going to graduate from a great university. Then we're going to serve our country as officers. And then we're going to get out in the civilian world, start businesses, go to law school, get our MBAs, etc. And I was like, why is this broken system here with boxing? So that seed got planted in the back of my head. In addition, while I was at Navy, I had an opportunity to intern at a private school in Newark for one of the leadership, over a leadership summer. I didn't go on the sailing. I forgot what that was called, where you get on the boats and you spend like 4 weeks on a sail ship.
Summer cruise.
Yeah, summer cruise. The leadership department approached me and said, hey, Mike, there's not just me. He didn't say, hey, Mike, there was like a bunch of us. But basically, there was an opportunity to mentor young men of color in Newark, New Jersey. This private school put the word out, said they were asking for midshipmen to come there and spend some time with them. And I have this, one of my core purposes in life is lift as we climb. I don't want to be the only one on the mountaintop. And so that really spoke to me to go to this private school. It was named as St. Benedict's Prep, which is an all boys private school in downtown Newark that caters a young men of color. I spent 2 summers teaching leadership there, and really fell in love with the city of Newark during that time, because growing up in the South, I had never seen a private school where young men who looked like me. And I just felt like this was something cool going on here. And so that just planted a seed in the back of my head. And that's what got me introduced to Newark. I went on to graduate from Navy, was an infantry officer, went to Afghanistan in 2012, Japan and the Philippines in 2014. And I'm sure, like many of you, when you're trying to transition out, you're thinking about what does life look like next? And at this point, I felt like I had done everything in life I was supposed to. I had gone to a good school. I served my country as an officer. And I had this vision in my mind of starting an inner city boxing program in Newark at this school, St. Benedict's. And the vision was to recreate the Navy boxing program at a private school in downtown Newark. And so I was kind of torn though between going to grad school at Texas A&M, because you know when everybody's transitioning out, a lot of people go to grad school or moving to Newark, and people are pressing me. They're like, man, how are you going to make a living? There's no money in that. You're going to start a boxing gym and this and that. And I had a buddy of mine who's like, look, Mike, what are you doing? Because he caught me at my desk one day writing my college essays. He's like, you can't do this back and forth. He's like, you got to burn the ships. And so I decided to burn the ships. I called up the headmaster of St. Benedict's Prep and said, hey, sir, I would like to come work at your school. And he just told me to come on. You know, there was no contract, no, just a verbal handshake. So when I got out the military, I literally got my DD 214 on a Friday and loaded up my house on a Saturday, and then got in a U-Haul and drove to Newark, New Jersey, and literally slept on the couch at St. Benedict's. And eventually they put me in charge of the residence hall. So that's the job I took. I was a resident housing director. I didn't know I was going to do that job, but I found out when I got here. And they put me in a giant house with 70 teenage boys. So for about 3 years, I was daddy. And that's what I did. I ran a house in Newark, fed them, study hall, you name it. And then the thing I credit that experience with, and why it's important work I do now, it gave me real insight into the challenges that young men of color face, particularly in the inner city. And I felt like I was at ground zero working at St. Benedict's, because the majority of the kids couldn't afford to go there. They were subsidized by private donors. And the house that I ran was almost like a last resort for a lot of them. So it was a step before they got kicked out of school. And so I spent time, you know, raising these young men. And it was a really nice transition for me because, you know, I had been in the Marines. I was an infantry officer. I was an all male environment at the time. It was like leading a platoon again. And so to go from that into St. Benedict's, you know, it was just like, it was leadership. I had a reason to get up each morning. I had to make sure the kids were taken care of, got them out of the house. But during that process too, was when I was moving up here, the headmaster told me, I was like, oh yeah, well, I get a gym. That was the stipulation. I got to coach boxing. And he's like, yeah, come on. I'm working on it. Well, of course I get up here and there's no gym. So not surprised. But again, one thing I learned at the Naval Academy is people just make stuff. You know, there's no soccer club, they make the soccer club. No jiu-jitsu club, they make it. And so I took that spirit and I started a boxing program in the residence house of Lady House. We pushed the table and chairs out the way, and that's where we started. And then eventually the city of Newark built a free boxing gym here in town, and I would start to commute my kids there to train them. And what ended up happening was I was doing this, you know, I was working in the evening. So the nice thing was I had the morning off to myself, but I would go train my boxing kid, my team, the St. Benedict's boxing team at the time, at this local city gym. And one of the things I realized too was there a lot of the young kids didn't have coaches around. It's not like at Navy, you know, we always, you know, somebody's always in charge in the military, but out in the civilian world, it can be like the wild, wild west. So I would see, you know, my kids are all organized, they got gear, I'm instructing them. And I would see all these other city kids that didn't necessarily have coaches. I'm like, oh man, come over here and train with us. And so that's what we did. I started really focusing on impacting, you know, other kids. And it became the point where I wanted to impact more kids outside of just St. Benedict's, because I also knew that the commute going back and forth, right? It was a real sketchy side of town, probably one of the worst sides of town. And I was limited by the number of kids I could take because we were communicating back in my vehicle. So I was looking for something a little bit closer. So I approached the city of Newark over text, and I knew the head of recreation at the city of Newark. And I asked him, I said, hey, do you guys have a gym somewhere else in town, a space that we could outfit into a gym? And I told him, I was like, if there's a space, we'll outfit it ourselves. You don't have to do anything. He came, picked me up, took me around to a bunch of different spots, and then said, will this work? And I was like, it will. And so he gave me the thumbs up. And that was the day I became an entrepreneur. Had no idea what I was doing. And it was just, but it was one of those moments in life where you get challenged, because I told people for so long that I wanted to start this inner city boxing gym. I want to do this stuff. And then you get a space and it's like, now what? You know? And,
Mike, let me interrupt you with a question.
Yep.
How much time passed between your arrival on the couch, you know, sleeping on the couch, and that day? How much time passed?
About a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. So
wow.
It was October of 2016. And the funny thing about it was, to be quite frank, Newark can be a rough city. And so, you know, nobody cares I went to the Naval Academy here. I'm just going to tell you that, right? They didn't even know what the Naval Academy was, right? But all that and you know, they've heard, to be quite frank, a lot of people talk a big game, you know, and then to see people actually execute on it, it was starting to, you could always already tell something was different about this guy. They would just be like, Mike, he just moves different. They just said I was in the Navy. I kept telling them I was in the Marine Corps, but they're just like, he's a Navy guy. But, you know, they just said he moves different. And I would just get stuff done. And so, you know, I had that moment of, okay, now what? I was like, well, I guess I just start painting. So that's what I did. Just started painting the gym, which you see behind me here. And this space, this was October 2016, became what is known as the Ironbound Boxing Academy, our free boxing gym in Newark, New Jersey. And just through my classmates at the Naval Academy, you know, people found out what I was doing. And a buddy of mine reached out to me. His name's Luke Finney, because we were going to another Naval Academy guys bachelor party. A bunch of us, like 4 or 5 of us, and I was picking Luke up from the airport. And Luke found out that I was doing this boxing gym, and he had just got back from this program at Stanford University called Stanford Ignite, and said, hey man, dude, you should go to this program. And I was like, what is this? He's like, it's entrepreneurship. They'll teach you this and teach you that. And I was like, okay, it sounds good. But there was still this gap between when this time frame would be. But he said, I'm going to send you the application and I'm going to remind you. And so sure enough, 6 months passed. I launched the Ironbound Boxing Academy. You know, I'm living at St. Benedict's, putting kids to bed, feeding them. I'm coaching boxing at the Ironbound Boxing Academy. And then I had opportunity to go to Stanford Ignite the following summer on a full ride, because when I applied, you know, they asked me about my program and I told them about it. And for everyone that participates, one person gets this full kind of scholarship to fly out there and go. And they sent me. And, you know, I'll tell y'all, when I left the military, I had an interesting experience in the military, and I have a podcast. It'll tell you all about it. I had a great time. I was an infantry officer. I loved it, but I did have my challenges like others in war. And so when I was leaving the military, I kind of wanted to distance myself a little bit from the military, just in a sense, I wanted to be my own man, you know, make my own name for myself. And when I got to Stanford Ignite and I'm out there and I'm around these veteran entrepreneurs, I was like, yo, this isn't so bad, you know, because everybody was motivated. We're all trying to start these ventures and whatnot. And I was like, this isn't, I really like this. I always thought the vets walked around with the campaign cover hats, you know, and for those of you that if there's any Marines here, you know, they wear the combat action ribbons and the giant bumper stickers. I was like, that's not me. But when I got to Stanford, I was like, this is amazing. And while I was out there, I ended up getting connected with an organization called Bunker Labs. I went to a bunker brew, like the last day of the program. And somebody said, I was like, this is great. I was like, do they have something like this back in New York? And they did. And I got introduced to Bunker Labs, New York City. And when I came back from that program at Stanford over the summer, I got connected with Bunker Labs, and they invited me to pitch at one of their musters. It was like this New York City muster event. And it was the same day they were launching what became the We Work Veterans in Residence program. So I'm at Stanford. I come back from Stanford. I go pitch at this event. And Stanford was the first time I had ever pitched. Had no idea what pitching was. And then I get there and I pitch at this We Work event. And the CEO of Bunker Labs was there, Todd Connor, all the Bunker Labs staff, all the We Work people. And they basically approached me and said, hey, we're standing up this new veteran in residence program in New York City. We feel like you would be a great fit. And do you mind volunteering and helping us run the program? And I was like, you know what? I don't work during the day because of my job at St. Benedict's, right? I coach in the evening. I put the kids to bed in the evening. So what are the requirements? And they basically told me I just had to rally around these entrepreneurs. There was like 10 entrepreneurs, a cohort, you know, be at the space 2-3 times a week. And, you know, I have free access to the workspace. So that's what I did. So now my hustle got a little harder. So now I was running a free boxing gym in Newark. I was living in the residence hall. And then I was running the Veterans in Residence program in New York City. And one of the requirements, though, was there was an interview where they wanted to interview about the program. And since I was the volunteer in New York City, the point of contact, Fox News wanted to interview me. So I go to the Fox News interview. And next thing you know, and in the startup world, you all can probably relate. A lot of people haven't actually built stuff yet. They're still talking about it. So they have their apps and their minimum viable products and this. And it's not the best for the camera, to be quite frank. No photographers want to come over and you know, look over your shoulder and take pictures of your laptop. And so
it ain't like a boxing gym.
Not like a boxing gym. And so I sat down for that first interview, and you know, I'm telling them about Bunker Labs and Veterans in Residence, and they're asking me about, well, what's your venture? And I was like, oh, I run a free boxing gym in Newark, New Jersey. They were like, wait, what? They're like, you have any pictures of it? And I showed them pictures behind it, and they're like, we need to come to your gym. And so that's where the PR stuff started to happen, because every time I sat down to do an interview for WeWork or Bunker Labs, the question always came up of, what do you do? And I have a free boxing gym in Newark. And once they saw my gym, they wanted to come do a piece. So every piece I would do for Bunker Labs or WeWork led to a separate piece for Ironbound, just because of the visuals of it. But during that process, I really just enjoyed the atmosphere. I mean, Ironbound, we didn't have any money. We had probably like $100 in the bank. But when I joined the program, just being around other entrepreneurs, I updated my website, and then we had $3,000 in the bank by the end of the program, which was a big accomplishment for me because my whole thing was just covering the cost of registration for kids, feeding them. I was paying them out of pocket. I was living a very comfortable-ish life, but I was having a blast. But I caught the entrepreneur bug and I wanted to do Ironbound full time. And I was thinking about, man, how can I do this full time? And there was this is a fellowship called Echoing Green, where they basically give you 90K and seed funding for social entrepreneurs such as myself, healthcare, medical, all that kind of stuff. So you can focus on your venture full time. So I was banking that I would apply for the program, I would get it for Ironbound, and then I'd be able to focus on Ironbound full time. Well, I applied and I didn't get it. And as low as it was, I still felt like, man, this is what I got to do. So in the summer of 2018, I left my full-time job at St. Benedict's Prep to focus on Ironbound full-time. And what I told myself was I would just train corporate clients, right? I had a mentor. I came up with this business model, basically teaching boxing as a form of employee wellness. I didn't have
That's 2 years in, right?
That's 2 years in. Yeah.
2 years in. Yeah.
I didn't have any clients. I liquidated my savings. I did everything they told you not to do when you start a business, but I just felt pulled to do it. Well, about 3 months after, not 3 months, well, shortly after leaving that job, I got approached by WeWork to run their veteran entrepreneurship program. So be the WeWork representative for Bunker Labs within WeWork. And I was like, nah, I'm good. I burned the ships, right? I had that burn the ships mentality. It was like now or never. WeWork comes back, they were like, oh, okay, well, we understand. I met them at WeWork HQ back in the day. It was nice. And then WeWork comes back and they're like, hey, Mike, man, we really apply for the program. Even you going through the application process will really be helpful for us. So I was like, sure, no problem. So I do it. And then afterwards they said, are you interested in the job? I was like, no, man, I'm good. And then I'll say about a month later, they approached me and said, hey, Mike, realistically, we're probably not going to be able to fill this role until November. Would you be willing to come on as a part-time consultant? I didn't even know what consulting was, had no idea. And they're like 20 hours a week, $5K a month. Does that work? I was like, that works. We can make that work. And so I don't talk about it to a lot of people, but I was working as a consultant for WeWork and Bunker Labs while I was standing up my corporate wellness business. And at the time I only had like one client, probably like 200. I was bringing like $200 a week. My nonprofit had about $3,000 in it. And so I was basically, it goes back to lifestyle, the kind of lifestyle you kind of want to live. But I was hustling and I was figuring it out. And this gave me a lot of opportunity, gave me some cushion to really focus on the nonprofit, get stuff dialed in. And as I was going through this process, I was really learning a lot on the back end, being a consultant for WeWork, because they were using like Google Docs. I didn't even know what Google Docs was at the time. We were still sending emails back and forth from the military. The platforms, all these, all the tech stuff that they use, I got just thrown in the mix of it. But it became really beneficial for me because it would turn out to be really great OJT training. And so everything I was doing for WeWork and Bunker Labs, I was doing for Ironbound, building the back end, building all that kind of stuff out and just learning those processes. And but over the time, our brand was growing because we were getting a lot of exposure in television, a lot of exposure here and a lot of exposure there. And then eventually what ended up happening was my WeWork contract ended, and I was able to focus all solely on Ironbound and build out my corporate arm, which would employ kids from my gym, because that's where the idea came from. At a certain point, and my view has evolved, which I'll talk about, but these young men I was working with, they get a little older and they come up to you and they're like, coach, you got a job? You know anybody who's hiring? And so I felt like, there's this economic piece to it too. And I thought by building a corporate wellness business, I could give my kids some part-time work, hire them as trainers. And so that's what I did. And so from 2019 up until the pandemic, that's what we did. I got my guys hired working with CEOs here in town. I was teaching boxing to companies in the New York City metro area, WeWork, Spotify, Next Jump, all these clients. And then the pandemic hit. And literally it took me, I had fought this entrepreneur fight, bootstrap, hustling, for about 2 years. And then the pandemic hit and my revenue went to zero, right? The day they canceled the NBA, I knew it was stick a fork in me, I'm done. because I just felt like with the NBA canceled, there's going to be no boxing. I mean, what are we talking about here? So NBA cancels. We have to close the Ironbound Boxing Academy. And so I'm literally just sitting in my apartment in Newark, New Jersey, where half the city's unemployed. And we already had really some high unemployment numbers prior to the pandemic. And so when it's hit, man, it was just a lot. But thankfully, I'm part of a group called the Lions Pride. And I don't know if Bill Watkins has talked here, but I have a business coach and I have a cohort to lean on. My coach got on the call and was like, it's time to step up. I was like, what are you talking about, man? Step up. What are you talking about? I was like, the gym's closed. We can't do anything. This is the end. He's like, man, leaders, this is the time to step up. So I went back to my core. And one of the reasons I started Ironbound was to, create social impact in the lives of young men of color. So what I do, I start doing free workouts on Instagram. I was like, all these kids are stuck inside. They're not doing anything. I'm just going to jump on Instagram and start teaching free boxing classes every day. And then I contacted the city of Newark and I said, hey, can I send you one weekly workout? I recorded in my apartment and then you can stream it, across the city. And I don't know if you guys all believe in karma, but you start putting good energy into the universe, it comes back to you. And right when I started doing that, a lot of my clients start coming back on board and we're saying, hey, can you do virtual? And because I had already been doing the free classes, and this was only a time span of like 4 days, right? But you remember when COVID first hit, it felt like every day felt about like a month. Y'all remember that? Because nobody knew what was coming around the corner. So it was just moving like a snail's pace. But in the span of 4 days, I probably taught like 9 virtual boxing classes. So when the clients came on board, I was already ready to go. Versus a lot of trainers just kind of stuck. So I was doing
Mike,
that.
I want to quote Bill Watkins to you, man, from, let's see, this is back in, I think, April or something, last April or May when he came to talk to us then. What he said was, and this is right at the beginning of the COVID thing, right? He says, no one will forget how you behave right now. True, right?
Yep. No, absolutely. So I was doing that, man. I had already got those reps in. So clients came on board, boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, I recovered probably about 75. I wouldn't say 75, probably about 70% of my revenue teaching virtual boxing classes in my apartment here in Newark. I was having my kids help teach the free boxing classes. And we were all right. We weren't thriving, we were surviving, but we were doing all right. And that was when the connections start to connect with me with regards to the economics, because our local economy was just so devastated, right? All the small businesses closed down, everything's beat up. And I had always, just because of my experience with Stanford and WeWork and Bunker Labs, I always thought the pitch competitions were the coolest thing. I had never, the first time I ever pitched, I was like, well, I don't know, 31 or whatever. And I was like, man, this would be great experience for kids here in Newark. So I talked to my board and I said, hey, I want to do a pitch competition. I was going to do a $2,000 pitch competition for the kids at Ironbound. And I put the feelers out to a couple friends of mine, and overnight, like the donations start to roll in. And I was like, wow, well, this is on to something. But for me, it was never about a pitch competition. It was mainly just giving them this exposure. But I realized, like, man, we can't get these kids pitch. You got to prepare them for success first. And so what we ended up doing was we ended up launching a virtual incubator called Thrive, where over the course of 4 weeks, we taught young men and women here in the city of Newark how to start a small business. We taught them finance, how to start a small business, finance, marketing, and leadership, with the intent of giving them a grant at the end of the program. And for me, the other thing too was, as an entrepreneur, very few entrepreneurs hit a home run their first time up at plate. Usually it's their 5th, 6th, 7th time at plate. And so with a lot of the crowd I deal with, the first time they're swinging is when they're 30 years old, or when somebody gives them this grant and expects them to hit a home run, and it's just not realistic. So my thesis with Thrive was, if we could start the process sooner than later, get them some swings at the plate, then, by the time they do have an opportunity to really launch something, they have experience. And so that was the concept behind Thrive. And so the grant was really just to incentivize the education process. The support was overwhelming for the program.
Mike, what kinds of businesses did you see them pitch?
First one was, and this is the impressive part about it, a lot of the kids they already have launched the businesses in their minds. They're doing Instagram, they're hustling. One girl, her name Daniela Palacios, she started a bilingual publishing company to help kids learn their native language. particularly she started around her brother because he has trouble learning Spanish with a lot of the text. So she wanted to create a book to help him learn Spanish. Now other people, social media, some people sell shoes. They buy shoes and they flip them and sell them for a higher price. They want to do t-shirts, make stickers. I mean, it's amazing, right? All these little niche businesses. And so I was building out Thrive around that. And this is what I was saying about how it kind of came full circle for me, because as I'm sitting in Newark and I'm seeing crime go on all across the country and everything, I realized that if we want to lower crime and violence in these communities, you need to create some sort of economic opportunity for people, whether it's good jobs, meaning labor, or, entrepreneurship. And the nice thing about entrepreneurship is, especially, the solopreneurs, the freelancers, right? It gives them an opportunity, right? Because I grew up in an environment where if I want to go rent a game at Blockbuster, I know we got some 90s grads in here, so I know y'all know Blockbuster is back in the day. I would go cut a lawn, cut 2, 3, 4 lawns, have some money, $15, and then I would go, rent a Blockbuster game. So just going back, but nobody ever taught me that, man, you could get one lawn that you could cut for $50 and it would cover you the whole month. I never knew that kind of stuff. And so with Thrive, it's like, we're able to kind of bring the curriculum down to meet them where they are. And it was a development process. And I'll tell you, when I launched it, I was slightly intimidated. I'm like, who is Mike Stedman to launch an incubator? I got a boxing gym, I've been figuring it out. But again, in these situations where nobody else is going to do it, and I just learned the process. And so, with Ironbound, I changed our core purpose. Originally our core purpose was to change lives through boxing. And that's what I preached. When I stood up the board of directors, I said, this is what I do, change lives through boxing. And then after this pandemic, I decided to change our core purpose to build champions in and out of the ring. Boxing allows us to do it in the ring. Thrive allows us to do it out of the ring. And all of a sudden, I got this clarity around how to bring the vision to life. Remember at the beginning, I told y'all we had about $3,000 in the bank account. I raised about $100,000 in the midst of this pandemic to support young men and women of color in the city of Newark. And to the point to where I was feeling a little cognitive dissonance going into the new year, because I know it's been such a challenging year for a lot of people. And for me to be able to accomplish what we've accomplished with Ironbound, the CEO of Everlast sits on our board. We end up getting a grant from the Dick's Sporting Goods Foundation. The veteran community has been just so overwhelmingly amazing. And we're at the point now where we're looking at outfitting a second space here in the city, which will be a boxing gym and an incubator co-located. And so, yeah, that's what I'm working on now. And we also, in Q3, I actually stood up a podcast production agency, which is why you see this microphone here, and using all the lessons I learned, because as I was switching to do the corporate wellness, it was just soul sucking for me. I didn't enjoy it. Going via Zoom just wasn't fun for me, and I just saw this thing within and for those of you who got the MBAs and everything, you can feel it when an industry is dying, right? It's almost like you have to look for money everywhere. You got to look for money under the tables and all this kind of stuff. And that's what it felt like a little bit with the corporate wellness, there just didn't seem this giant demand for it. And so I was looking for a soft exit. And so I exited out of it using the experience I gained 2 years of just hustling with building Ironbound up, getting better at branding and marketing. And I launched this agency, got my first client, got my second client, got my third client, exited out of that. And I've been producing podcasts and running Ironbound ever since. So I know I covered a lot of years in this time frame this far. But for me, man, I'll tell you a couple lessons I've learned just through my growth. And I was actually talking to one of my Marines about it. Learning to accept risk and live with risk. And I think a lot of times people just feel so stuck in place. And I see it now because I think COVID has just caused so much reflection in a lot of people's lives. I get texts from people all the time about, man, I hate my job. It's soul sucking. It's affecting my health, and at a certain point, we feel like there's this sense that like life is just happening to us and we have no control over it, And I tell people, man, like you have control at every moment. It's like, society sometimes can make us forget, but you do. And it's like, oh man, well, I don't know what to do. I was like, listen, man, it comes with the risk. That's the thing. People see they see you doing amazing things now, but they don't see you, dry heaving in the bathroom, dealing with the nerves that are coming, or when, you're watching that WeWork IPO crash and burn and they owe you all those receivables. It's like all that kind of stuff you deal with, but it just comes with the territory. And I've just learned that, man, just the ability to just take risk and accept it and live with it, win or lose, but at least, showing up to fight. That's the best way I can put it. Another thing, your peer group is so important. This is a peer group right here. People looking out for each other, holding each other accountable, but having a strong peer group of people that you can lean on and push you. And I know for me, I mentioned that one of the groups I joined, I got a business coach about in 2019, right after that WeWork contract was ending. I decided to invest in a business coach. I didn't have money for a business coach. Never thought in my life I could afford a business coach, but I just felt like this was something I had to do, go all in. And I did it, and now I do stuff. I have an admin, I have all this stuff that I never thought that I feasibly would do because I don't have a business background. My background is in history and I got my master's in American studies from Rutgers. So I spent 2 years really fighting against serious imposter syndrome of, am I good enough? I'm not smart enough. Oh my God, all these people are so much better than me. And then when I got my business coach and joined my cohort with the Lions Pride, I went out to our first meetup and I was like, I don't belong here. Like I came back to Newark depressed because it felt like I was building, you're around all these business owners and they got successful businesses and they're talking about $1 million in revenue and $100,000 in revenue. And I'm coming back to Newark in my 1-bedroom apartment with no gym, with a gym, and like Newark is just grimy. It's hard. It's not like Annapolis. Annapolis is like nice. You feel special when you're there. Newark is just the grind. But you know what, man? You just stick with it. Stick with that accountability. And my peer group leveled me up. Just being half the time, just being in the room in places like this, just being in the room will make you better, and you start to learn from people and you start to grow. And that started to happen. I'm learning from my peers in the Lions Pride, and I'm just getting sharper. I'm becoming a sharper entrepreneur. And over time, and I think this is what they tell you, Jason probably knows about the 3-year mark, 2 or 3 year mark, it's like it just starts compounding, right?
And you start gelling.
Yeah, it just starts gelling. That's like boxing. You're hitting the bag, your hook sucks, you can't figure it out. Then all of a sudden, your hook gets tighter. And you're like, okay, man, it's a little bit better. It's a little bit better. And now you really got it. And it kind of happens with entrepreneurship too. You spend so much time feeling like, man, I'm just making it up, have no idea what I'm doing. But then you're like, man, I've been making it up for a long time. This is actually working, right? So
that's called experience.
Let's keep making it up this way. And then all of that experience, all that grind and all the hustle and all the stuff that you've been doing, it just starts to compound. You just get sharper. And then once you start letting go of that in the back of your head, get out of the way. That's my one regret, man. I wish today that all that imposter syndrome, that feeling like I don't belong and all that kind of stuff, it was a parking brake. And it was really holding me back. And learning how to COVID taught me to overcome that, because to be able to lead my gym and lead my program, because at the end of the day, I mentioned Echo and Green. I mentioned all these, there's a lot of failures, the dry heaving and all that kind of stuff. But my kids at Ironbound, they have no idea. You still look like a superhero to them because they've never seen people do what you do, And at this point, Newark is like, they're like watching Mike, right? They're like, he's always doing something, I'm in the gym, holding mitts. I'm like, hey, I gotta go. And next, they're like, he's on TV. It's like, what is he doing? But it's all to raise support and awareness. But even in my lowest days, man, your kids, they look up to you. And a lot of you, I'm sure, are parents. And so, in COVID and all this craziness going on, I'm sure they were looking to you for kind of strength. But going back to our time of just being leaders, sometimes you just got to step up, and you just keep pushing, even when you don't feel like pushing. So I've learned all these just lessons along the way. And it's been humbling. It's been amazing. And my focus now that parking brake is off, is really creating economic opportunities for young men and women of color here in the city of Newark. Because when I say, like, Newark was already in a issue, we have an artificial economy here, right? All the businesses, all the stuff that's here, these people don't actually live here. So once the pandemic hit, all that money start leaving the city, and they're just stuck, and all these offices, the Prudentials and the Panasonics and the Audible, that they don't live in the city. So none of that money is circulating in the city. And so we find ourselves in a really, really challenging economic situation here moving forward. And I feel like this is the time for Ironbound, because one of the things that I pride myself is being able to leverage human capital to come into a place like Newark to support and that's the biggest thing we do. Like, it's not necessarily the money, but it's just giving a kid a connection. Like one of my thrivers here, I just had lunch with him today, took him out to lunch here downtown Newark. When he started, right, he's a 22-year-old young man named Manny, and he does graphic photography for brands, whatever. He'd be lucky if he finished with $1,000 a year. He told us today at lunch, he's like, man, I finished the year with like $30,000 in just this last 2 quarters, just off the ability of an intro, right? Costs nothing, takes nothing, hey, I know you were looking for a photographer. Let me introduce you to Manny. A lot of those kids, they don't have that kind of network and they don't have that kind of connection. And so going back to my Lift as We Climb, I'm really focused also on bridging that gap, because I got free workspace all across the city of Newark. Literally, I get free workspace from the Veteran Incubator. I got free workspace from one of my clients. I got the NJIT Accelerator. I got free workspace. And there's a lot of young men and women here who look like me that didn't serve in the military and they don't get anything. And so my focus is on bridging that gap and leveraging, again, the human capital from my network and my experience to give back, going back to that mantra, Lift as We Climb, and just really being a platform here in the city of Newark of hope and inspiration. What I'm working through now is the boxing piece, because in Newark, people understand boxing. The demographic, the kids, I get understand boxing. But in the fundraising realm of nonprofitness, right, there's like a glass ceiling, right? Because we don't really innovate. We all think we still think teaching is lining up in a classroom, 70% of us not graduating, and then working at McDonald's for somehow. Or that education is, going to spend $150,000 when you don't even have a pot to piss in, So really just kind of challenging these understandings of what does it mean to be truly educated? How do I teach my community to survive and thrive, And my vision for Ironbound is also to be like a think tank. I'm having to sell boxing to people that I really shouldn't need to sell boxing to. And so one of the things I learned through Bill was this concept of your perfect customer. And maybe I've just spent time going to the wrong people, and I need to go to the people who just get it, because they're a lot easier, they're a lot more supportive, and they understand it. And so that's what I'm working through now, was really tying in this narrative of boxing and branding, connecting how to build champions in and out of the ring, and just making a powerhouse with Ironbound a boxing. I want Ironbound to be a flagship here in the city of Newark. I want to be a beacon of hope for young men and women. I want them to know they can come train. And let's be honest, boxing is fun. It's cool. Everybody gets it. And entrepreneurship is pretty cool too, And the reason I wear my beard and rock my hoodie is because they can see themselves in me too. I walk the beat here in the street, I get stopped at my apartment building because they're like, do you live here? Yes, I do. I live in a nice building downtown. But again, all this craziness you still have to deal with. But it's important for me to be here in Newark, to walk the street, walk the beat, and really be seen and be a part of this community, and really create some economic opportunities for the community. So that's it in a nutshell. I know that probably went too long, but
no. Feel free, Mike. This is just extraordinary, man. I mean, the imposter syndrome thing. Look, I think that's just part of the experience too, right? I mean, the question, you ask yourself the question, who am I to be here doing this? And at some point you realize, oh, I'm the guy who's here doing this, right? You're the guy who's there doing it when nobody else would. This is just, wow. All right, go ahead, talk.
I was going to say, I like to pick on the MBAs because, my friends would just graduate from their MBA program. Yeah. Like, what are your margins? I don't know. Like, we're trying to man, can you come help us out? And that was the thing too, because my peer group, I'll be honest with y'all, because y'all are Naval Service Academy. I'll tell you, it'd be pretty hard to find 5 Black men that have gone to Harvard Business School, Wharton Business School, all these places, right? And they all know each other. There was a time when I was coming up in the South and I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. I didn't see a Black midshipman until I got to the Naval Academy. That was my first exposure to it, So I'm very in this fortunate position now of like, I look around my peer group and I'm just like, the guys going to Harvard Law School, Harvard Business School, like Wharton, all these. And I'm talking about like your top 5 people. And so when I'm living in an apartment in Newark, raising 70 teenage boys, that kind of, man, am I failing right now? Or when I left my job and I'm out here just hooking and jabbing, it's like, what am I doing? And it does kind of, because then you start to ask yourself, like, do I fit in their circle? Am I doing it right? But again, all this kind of stuff, just all the mental stuff you start to go through. But again, you take off that parking brake and I just work, man. I just execute. I just get it done. And so I don't worry about that stuff anymore. But early on,
Amen.
it was very challenging because remember, you didn't have anything. This is just hopes and dreams. You're sleeping on that couch and you're like, did I really make the right decision? And then you start to kind of climb up. And when the pandemic hit, when I quit my job, I was like, it really hit me because I was in the city with a really high unemployment rate. And I had to go to I got the tires stolen on my car, right? Which that's why I was heaving in the bathroom, because I was like, this is life is just punching me in the face right now. And I walked in that police station and reported, and I look up on that Crime Stopper wall, right? And all I see are a lot of people that look like me. And I just quit my job and down in one of the roughest cities in the country. Like, what am I doing? But again, you just you bounce back. And then in the pandemic, am I making the right decision? What is going on? But if at any point in this process would I have thrown in the towel, I would have never been able to accomplish the stuff I'm able to accomplish now. And so now there's a little bit of pattern recognition there. And I know that when I'm getting pushed, I can feel it. You know what I mean? When you're kind of stuck, you got to get off the hamster wheel. Like when I decided to hire an admin because I was teaching, 12 boxing classes a week, bodies breaking down, and I just said, forget it, I'm gonna hire an admin. And then she goes out and gets us a 30K donation. Like all this kind of stuff just happens. But again, it's accepting that risk that I go back to, just the simplest stuff. And so now there's that pattern recognition there, and I know how to push myself, and I know how to grow.